of your Ryzens this afternoon, so you can take some more pictures. So let's talk about the product. We've told you our brand name is Ryzen, our overall brand is called Ryzen. We will call the 8-core 16-thread version Ryzen 7. Let's get into some of the details.
Finally, the long-awaited next generation of Ryzen processor is here, bringing in the new 5nm processing node from TSMC, replacing their older 7nm. Now, the processor we have in our hands here is the popular 6-core Ryzen 5 7600X. And in this video review, we'll be taking a look at the biggest changes for it, its specification, as well as how it performs in all our benchmark suite. So, let's get into it. Now, first off, the biggest change for the new Ryzen platform, it comes related with the number 5. Now, why 5? Because the new platform will be called AM5, and with it, it will be supporting the new standards of RAM, DDR5, as well as PCIe Gen 5. That will be the last 5. Now, even though PCIe Gen 5 is not really standard in today's NVMe and graphic card market yet, but we can be sure that it will slowly come in as more platforms will be able to take advantage of it. This means even faster transfer speed for future NVMe, as well as more bandwidth for future graphic cards. Now, let's talk about the specification for the Ryzen 5 7600X. Now, 6-core 12-thread is still plenty for today's computing use, so the 7600X will still be rocking the 6-core 12-thread configuration. But the biggest improvement comes in the clock speed, with a whopping 4.7 GHz for the base clock. That's even higher than the previous turbo boost clock of the 5600X by 100 MHz. And the turbo boost clock speed going up to more than 5 GHz at 5.3 GHz. Other than the base clock speed, base and turbo clock speed improvement, the cache has actually seen an improvement as well. And if just looking at its level 3 cache, you might think, well, it's the same as the previous one with both of them only having 32 MB. But the improvement actually comes from the level 2 cache, where it's doubled in size from the previous generation, going from 3 MB to 6 MB. But due to the improvement of the core clock speed as well as the cache capacity, the TDP or thermal design power has been increased as well from the previous 65 watts to 105 watts. Because of that, AMD won't be including any rave coolers as well, as the stock rave coolers won't really be sufficient to cool a 105 watt processor. So for anyone looking to get themselves a Ryzen 7000 series of processor, do remember to get a good cooler as well. A notable addition for the Ryzen 7000 series of processor is the inclusion of the instruction set AVX512. Now, if you're a user who primarily uses his PC for gaming as well as maybe even video encoding, you won't really take advantage of the AVX512. However, programmers will certainly appreciate this inclusion of the instruction, as it will help speed up compilation speed of codes. Now, it also shows a big improvement on software that's able to take advantage of this instruction, such as Y-Cruncher benchmark, which we will show in our benchmark segment later as well. Future software may also take advantage of this instruction, so it's really nice to see that this instruction to be included in the mainstream series of Ryzen processors. Before jumping into our benchmark and testing, it's also worth mentioning that the new Ryzen 7000 series of processor does in fact include an integrated graphic. Now, this is a first for even the X series processor for Ryzen, as before this, their integrated graphics are only found in their G series. Now, we didn't include any test or benchmark with the integrated graphic of Ryzen, as at the time of recording, we weren't able to get our hands on the driver for the integrated graphic chip. However, do stay tuned with us, as we intend to do benchmarking and testing with the integrated graphic as soon as we get our hands on the drivers. So look forward to that. And here is our test setup, where we use it to do our testing and benchmark to see how the 7600X performs and compare to its older sibling, the 5600X. We'll be going through various benchmarks and productivity suites to show you the performance of the 7600X. There will also be some benchmarks for some of the latest game titles. All these are being tested with the Radeon RX 6900 XT at 1080p with RTX setting off on certain games that we tested with RTX, and running on the latest driver of Adrenalin 22.8.2 to avoid any possible GPU bound scenario. Now, resizable bar is also turned off to keep the test as consistent as possible, and all of the benchmark results are done and combined through a 3-run average. So, let's get started. For Cinebench R20, we can see that the improvement for the multi-core score is around a 48% improvement over the previous generation, and the single-core improvement is around 30%. In Cinebench R23, we can see a similar improvement for the multi-core score at around a 45% gain, while the single-core performance also shows similar improvement at a 28% gain. Now let's get into the benchmark that are more reflective of real-world performance, and we're starting with Blender. And we'll start by checking the ever-popular BMW test, and we can see the time required to render is reduced by about 69%. Nice. We also see similar performance time uplift with the classroom test being completed 69% faster as well. And for the GooseBerry benchmark test, an improvement of 73% can be observed. So for 3D render times on applications such as Blender, we can see an improvement of around 70% in render times. Now that's a lot. For Premiere Pro, we ran PugetBench Standard, and we can see a general performance improvement from the previous generation at about 31% on the video editing suite software. On to Photoshop, and for Photoshop, we ran PugetBench for Photoshop as well, and from that, we can see the 7600X will perform about 33% faster than the 5600X. Now, the next video editing suite that we'll be testing out would be Davinci Resolve, and we'll be testing out with PugetBench for Davinci Resolve. And here we can see a 15% improvement from the previous 5600X. Although not a massive improvement as compared to Premiere Pro, it's still a nice result. Next up, we have V-Ray Benchmark, which is a standalone benchmark application with the sole intention to test and see how fast your system can render. And from that, we can see that the newer 7600X is almost 50% faster than the 5600X. The next benchmark we did is a brand new test for us called Y-Cruncher. It's one of the few benchmarks out there that is able to utilize the AVX512 instruction set. And here, we can see that the benchmark difference between the 7600X and 5600X is about 59% when it comes to this benchmark. Next up, we'll have a look at the gaming benchmarks, and starting off with TimeSpy version 1.2, we can see CPU score of the 7600X is about 28% higher, and this allowed the overall score to be increased by about 8% from the 5600X. Then we have TimeSpy Extreme, and here we can see the newer 7600X manages to score about 36% higher compared to the 5600X. And this enables the overall score to be increased by 9% as well. Coming next, we have Forza Horizon 5, and we're able to see that the 7600X is able to perform 31% faster on the average FPS, whereas the 1% low sees it performing 24% faster over the previous generation. After that, we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where it's faster by 17% for the average FPS, but is able to perform faster for its 1% low by about 20%, which is quite impressive actually. Red Dead Redemption 2 is next on our list, and for the average FPS, we can see it's about 13% faster, and the 1% low is about 15% faster, which, although not a substantial improvement compared to the previous two titles, is still a nice bump in performance for a processor with the same amount of cores and threads. For our next game, we have CyberPunk 2077. Although being not a very optimized title on the PC, we can still see an improvement of about 9% for the average FPS and a 12% better performance for the 1% lows. Coming next, we have Resident Evil 8 or Village, which is a 2021 title that is still quite new. Here, we can observe an improvement of 15% on the average FPS and a 1% low improvement of around 12%. From all the games we tested, we can see that 7600X is around 17% faster on its average FPS and about 16% faster for its 1% low compared to the 5600X. But what if you're an esports gamer who primarily plays games like Apex Legends or even CSGO? Will it give you a beneficial performance increase over the 5600X, where in a competitive environment like esports game, every single FPS will help you be more competitive over your competitors? Well, for that, we did some testing on a few popular esports games as well to see how the 7600X stacks up. All these games are tested in the lowest preset at 1080p to simulate a competitive player setting. And here's how the 7600X performed compared to the 5600X. First up, we have Apex Legends, where the game will actually be capped by its own in-game engine of up to 300 FPS, even after unlocking the FPS limit. However, we can still see a 3% improvement for the 1% low in this situation. Next up, we have the ever-popular CSGO, where players have done everything to push their FPS up to gain a competitive advantage. And here, we can see the average FPS is faster by about 22%, and the 1% low are 12% faster. But do take note, we're talking about FPS of upwards of 800 FPS. So realistically, it's probably very hard to tell the difference even if you place them side by side, but it still shows the improvement of the 7600X. The next esports title we have will be Dota 2, where after unlocking its FPS limit, we can see that the Ryzen 5 7600X is able to perform 26% faster on its average FPS and 30% faster on its 1% low compared to the 5600X. So, if you're really looking to maximize your FPS for your favorite esports games, the 7600X seems like an attractive option to consider. And that's all the benchmark and result for the 7600X compared to the 5600X. Now, what do I personally think of the Ryzen 5 7600X? Well, personally, I think it's a proper next step forward for the Ryzen series of processor, as the Ryzen 5 5600X is in no way a slow processor. So this just shows the impressive performance gain you can get from the 7600X. And it also makes me quite excited for the AM5 platform, as with AMD's reputation for their long-term support for AM4, I think it's safe to say that AM5 will be getting the same long-term support from them as well. And for anyone looking to get into the AM5 platform, I don't think you'll have any regrets getting into it, as it's very likely you'll be able to upgrade forward to their future series of processor, such as Ryzen 8000 or 9000, without needing to upgrade a lot of other things such as motherboard. As for the 7600X, I think it performs well in productivity workload, especially given a 6-core 12-thread processor. It also has a nice gaming improvement compared to its predecessor, and I think it's a nice upgrade if you're coming from an older processor such as the Ryzen 5 1600 or 2600. And for any buyer looking to get into the AM5 platform, you'll be able to utilize newer standards such as DDR5 and PCIe Gen 5. This should ensure you to have a longer upgrade path compared to the older platforms. And that's all from us from Studio Azio and our take at the Ryzen 5 7600X. Do remember to like and share our video, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as follow us on our respective social media. Tell us, what would you like to test next, and what do you think we should add onto our benchmark suite? And of course, a special thanks to AMD Malaysia for giving us a chance to try out your new Ryzen 7000 series of processors. Oh, I can't wait to see what comes next from you guys. That's all from me today. I'm Han. Goodbye and stay safe. Thanks for watching.